welcome to this episode of In the Huddle, talking tennis today. I'm joined by two guys I grew up with playing the junior tennis circuit. All of us trying to beat each other. But nowadays, some 30 years later, we've got quite a lot in common. We still work in our sport. We all believe in the benefits of the college pathway. We've also all written a book about our experiences. So today's episode, we're going to have a chat all about that and our own perspectives on the sport of tennis and some insight as to how young juniors and their families can best navigate junior sport, not just tennis, and in general discussing how the college pathway fits into that. So I'm joined by Luke Bourgeois, who's Director of Voyager Tennis in Sydney. Luke's, for those who don't know Luke, former top 10 ITF junior. Highest ATP ranking in singles was 260 odd. And even better in doubles in the top 160. And towards the end of his career, he was lucky enough to travel with as a hitting partner for the great Roger Federer. In a pretty good period of his career where I think you witnessed 6 Grand Slams, so that would have been an amazing experience. Also joined by Dr. Anthony Ross, second time on In the Huddle. For Anthony. Anthony's a world-renowned performance psychologist, founder of Mentally Tough Tennis, works with professional players, junior tennis players, and also college players and their teams to help maximise their performances. Excuse me. Anthony reached top 130 as an ATP doubles player, and prior to that he achieved the second best winning percentage under legendary college coach Peter Smith in his career, second only to Steve Johnson, who's obviously a very highly ranked ATP player now. But prior to all this, we played a lot of junior tennis together, and we've all lived to tell the tale, and we'll be sharing some of that today. So welcome, boys.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
Thanks, mate. Absolute pleasure.
Awesome. Fair introduction there, guys. You guys have got pretty good. I've given yourselves a big rap there. But done well. So look, we can all be has-beens today and reflect on some of that good stuff, I reckon, and hopefully produce some topics that might resonate with some of these tennis families out there and that are trying to navigate it all. So might just start it, like if we have a chat about our junior careers, I think, guys, it'd be pretty interesting for people to listen to. It's a while ago, but I think some of the things that you face as a junior we still face today, and we all see that as coaches and in our jobs. But Luke, I might start with you, mate. Like, I'd love to sort of get your perspective on how you found, discover the sport of tennis as a junior, and how you found that period of life. Like, was it an enjoyable one? Did it have its challenges, mate?
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. I mean, probably a little bit different than a lot of the families that we see now is, first of all, I was from a big family, so I was the youngest of 10 kids. And the way sort of tennis really, my oldest brother was a mad golfer. My next eldest brother was into his rugby. He was an Australian schoolboy and went down that path, playing quite a high level of rugby. And me being the youngest, he had a pretty bad knee injury where he had to go have surgery. And I think the surgeon said, mate, you're probably never going to run again. And it sort of got mum to sort of think, oh, geez, don't know if that's a sport I want my little baby playing. She sort of started sticking a tennis racket in the rest of us our hands. So the last 4 of us, my 2 sisters and my next eldest brother, we all played tennis. And not that it really stopped me. I actually played rugby for another 8 years anyway. But it was sort of a different sort of thing, because I guess a lot of them, we see kids specialising quite early and really getting into it. I had a different background. I was actually playing a lot of other sports, rugby, cricket. I mean, you name it, anything you could compete with, I was playing, and still played a little bit of tennis. But it wasn't until I was around 15 that I really sort of caught the bug, where I started getting a lot more exposure, found a really good environment, had a great coach, actually, Kim Warwick, who had come back as a former pro. I mean, he was a Australian Open finalist, won 6 slams, and my mum knew his sister. And I was actually his first pupil when he first came back to Australia, and Kim was the one that sort of got me really playing a lot. But I mean, early days, it was all just sort of local comp and getting out there and playing when I could, playing with family. But I sort of really remember my junior career sort of happening around 15 was a real age where you start seeing that sort of stuff happening, where first time I left Sydney to play, I went to Canberra, which was a great experience. And I know one of the things, well, what Kim would always say is, look, there's no need to travel until you're the best in the state or the best in the city, and then you can sort of look to go beyond that. And the next experience, when I started sort of coming across and seeing your names of like C. Bates in the draw, the superstar from Brizzy, and and the boys early on, obviously looked to really look up to you guys as obviously being probably more established players, was again going to the Nationals in Burnie as a 16-year-old.
Yep, remember that well.
Yeah. Oh, some of those rain delays, everyone out there squidging. And I still remember losing my first round, love and love, at Nationals. It was probably one of the only 2 love and loves I lost in my life. But it was, different journey than what we often see. But again, something that really intrigued me and I loved about it was the athleticism. Also, too, like playing a lot of team sports, sometimes you'd be in that team and you could try your best, and no matter what you do, you actually didn't really have an impact on the result. That's one of the things that I really loved about tennis, was being in control and having the opportunity to compete hard and probably frustrate people and try to figure people out. There's all the different things that you start seeing that we know at a high level of tennis. It really is about what goes on between the ears, and that was what really sort of grabbed me and what I really enjoyed. But yeah, that junior career sort of, gosh, it feels like it was so long ago now, but there's so many memories that can just sort of flash back for it. But it did transition quite quick because I wasn't necessarily the best, but I was really motivated and enjoyed it. And not long after that, I really again caught the bug. And I think after losing first round of Nationals, I made final the next year and won dubs within a sort of space of 12 months. Because again, finding the right environment, I started playing tons. I was literally playing everywhere I could, training every day, playing as many matches as I could. Obviously, Kim was put a really, really great sort of, I guess, foundation of knowledge to really tell you, hey, if you want to be good, this is what you need to do. And there are no secrets. I mean, that was one thing I figured out. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of perseverance in that. But probably one of the things that it then sort of transitioned to was from that sort of level, getting a lot more opportunities at a higher level. From sort of being a general no-name, someone who's to go and make up the draws to making final of Nationals, to then being invited to Australian teams and having that exposure was great. I remember the first time I went over to South Africa, I was 16, got picked in one of the Aussie teams to go play some ITFs. I didn't even know what they were. It's funny. I remember playing. It ended up being a grade 3 ITF where I got in. I made semis and I got my first ITF points. I didn't even know what it was. And it's sort of, it's probably again going to the Aussie Open later that year. My first time in Melbourne was to play the Australian Open. I remember playing qualies out at Notting Hill Pinewood, beating some guys that had been on the scene for such a long time and end up getting through. And it's amazing how small the tennis world is, but at the same time, how it can take you all over it. So that's probably where slightly different again from you boys. I know Batesy, obviously you're a national champ at an early age, and Rossi as well, kicking some goals all over the place. But it's my junior career, it really felt like it was just a lot of fun. It was a blur and ended up achieving some pretty amazing things. Won a junior slam in dubs, again, which all happened quite quickly. So my first ITF points in doubles was winning the Aussie. So
awesome.
Yeah, it all sort of happened through quite quickly. And I guess there's so many experiences. Probably think of again, we know the skills that you can develop and the personality traits that it creates. I mean, even again, I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but I remember playing one match against a couple of blokes, probably don't want to name them as well, but getting to the death of the match and thought it was game, set, match. Then all of a sudden, no, they disagreed on the score. Think we've all been there and had to end up start the third set again and go back to it because I don't know about you boys, but it's I view tennis, and again, I know we're all the same opinion, is it just gives you those life skills to really develop different traits. And I know we talk about a lot with the kids that we work with is having that positive mindset, working hard, being resilient, because the amount of times you've got to pick yourself back up off the floor. It's not that any of that sort of stuff, any of that shenanigans happen with you guys, because it's probably one of the things that we do see why we are is who we are. When you're honest and hardworking, you can see how you what you reflect, you attract, and it comes back at you. But no, I mean that's probably sort of as an overview of what happened and how that quickly transitioned to going to French Open Juniors and Wimbledon and down that path, and then from there it was probably just so many experiences, meeting so many people, and now probably one of the things I'm really proud of is that so many of them are still friends.
Yeah, Yeah, that's good,
Yeah,
mate. That's a pretty good wrap because we're in a sport that's pretty dog eat dog. As I said at the start, like we trying to beat the heck out of each other 30 years ago, us fellas, and anyone that you play. But at the end of the day, you're much longer retired than you are playing, and in terms of at the highest level, your relationships are probably what you know become important when you get a bit older, like us blokes, eh? So it's a good sign of success that you've maintained good relationships in the tennis world. I think that's as powerful as your actual dot points I read out before of the things you've achieved. Like that's a pretty good achievement too, mate.
yeah,
So,
no, mate, it really is. And I guess probably thrown over you, Rossi. What about you, mate? What are sort of your recollections of your career? Because I know we've all got different backgrounds, don't we? Too, like it's as similar as we are. It's so
Yeah,
interesting to see where we've come from. But mate, yeah,
yeah, yeah. Well, I actually I grew up in the country, so that's one different thing from you guys. In a little town called Billawheeler, about 5,000 people in central Queensland, and there was no tennis coach. And I originally got into tennis. We'd go on family holidays once a year, and there was a tennis court there, so I'd play with my family. Went back home and just literally started hitting against one end of the family home, the brick wall, and used to do that until for maybe a year or two. And then I was lucky enough, a coach by the name of Ken Hick, who was from a town an hour and a half away, started to come and coach. So I got into it through Ken. So similarly to you, I played all the sports in the country. Just that was basically life, was playing sport. And so and listening to you, it was really similar for me, I think. And I think this is probably fair enough to think most tennis players who are playing more sports, our personalities, why we attracted most to tennis, it really was that individual nature that, for whatever reason, I liked that sense of it being on me, and the result being more up to me rather than the team. So, and so I really started to play more tennis. And at about the age of 13 or 14, one of Gary Sticker was a great coach from my region, and he got the Tennis Queensland head job. And so he started inviting country kids down to stay at his place and play tournaments. So at that stage, I really had to decide, well, I'm going to play tennis because I couldn't play the other sports when I had to travel into the city. And actually thinking about my very first tournament in Brisbane,
here we go.
writing about this in Batesy's book, in the forward was playing this guy, Chris Bates, and he was the state champ, and I was this kid from the country, came down, playing at Milton, and I rock up at Milton. I was like, this is just the most amazing place. And probably about 20 minutes later, I'd lost 6-love to the great Chris Bates, and walked off crying. My auntie was there; she was from Brisbane, so I was bawling my eyes out and absolutely devastated. And Batesy just sent me back to the country with a really good lesson of what it was like to play in the city. So, yeah, that was one of my early memories. And even that, like thinking about now being a sports psych, if I think about the challenges that is part of junior tennis, and what I work a lot with now is helping kids respond well and develop skills, like you were talking about, Luke, to all the difficult emotions and the mental challenges that are part of playing the sport. And certainly, I think just playing and competing, right, and trying to become your best, that for me is a vital skill that's so important for all families, and particularly parents, to recognise that the challenges that we face. Luke, you talked about cheating and so forth. I think my perspective on something like cheating is a growth opportunity ultimately. And if I think back about playing tennis as a junior, I'm thankful that I was out there competing, occasionally getting cheated, because it really is, they're the sort of things that help give you the opportunity to potentially develop resilience, particularly if parents are seeing that and keeping connected with, for me, the big picture, right, of why we want kids playing tennis and so forth. So, so that was, I just kept, as a junior, just kept getting more and more into it. I just loved the sport, like you guys. and eventually moved down to Brisbane. And then I started getting more serious in the state squads and so forth. And I just sort of steadily improved over time. And a bit unlike you, Luke, like you really improved very, very quickly, right? Within that year or two when you got serious. But I was sort of just a steady improver over time, I think, steadily improved. And by the end of the juniors, I wanted to go pro, but I realised I wasn't good enough. So that's when I took the college route. But what about you, Batesy? I mean, even thinking about it brings up a lot of memories of playing you many times, and our journey really correlated in many ways in the juniors. And I guess the last thing I'd say is I would agree when I'm thinking about families in the sport, and I think perhaps these days it is harder to see it like we did, which was really we were great friends not only at the end of our careers but throughout, right? Like when I think of our sort of age groups, my best friends in the world are tennis players who I grew up playing with, and we were also during the time, and even our families, Batesy, were like really, really good friends throughout. So for us, it was like a great social like atmosphere as well as competing. I think the tournaments and so forth, like our whole families would always look forward to going and hanging out. And mate,
Yeah.
I think that's likely less common these days for whatever reason. Maybe you have some insights on that one too, Batesy and Luke. But think about it makes me think about your book, Batesy, and writing about those junior memories growing up. What are your thoughts and memories on the junior stuff?
Yeah, no, good point. I do remember that match. Like I remember it really. No, I do. I don't know why. I remember it so clearly. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Because I played so much tennis when I was a kid, and I remember that match. I remember the court. I remember what you were wearing. I remember it all.
Oh wow.
I really do. I'm pretty sure you had a yellow and black, like CQ sort of coloured
Oh, I
jersey.
would have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, so it's amazing that why would I remember that? But anyway, that's a good memory for me. Not so good for you, mate. But um, yeah, like obviously, yeah, it's pretty cool just having this chat because yeah, we've all come about tennis different ways. I was youngest of four boys. Dad, massive tennis family. Mum, not so much, but yeah, I sort of probably was always going to play tennis, based on my three older brothers were doing it, and my my uncle still plays around the world. Um, he's born to play tennis, Uncle Max, and
Yeah.
he'll be playing forever. So it's in my blood in that respect. Plus, I think for me, the biggest thing for me, I got out of junior tennis is that I was the youngest of four boys, and so it was just my identity. I was really, really good straight away, and I don't know why. I was a good player, but I guess I was pretty tenacious, fiery, refused to lose, didn't miss too much, I suppose. And I don't know why or how I got those characteristics, but it was just the way I played, and it worked. So yeah, as you said, Bourgeois, won the nationals when I was 12, which was just awesome. But I think, and I don't regret that because obviously that's a pretty cool achievement. But I think by the time you hit those puberty sort of teen years after that, sort of 14, 15 is where I struggled because I started losing for the first time really, and I probably not coping with that too well. So a little bit opposite to you, Luke, in that respect. And I remember the first time I ever saw you too in a draw, and just got this massive 6 foot guy. It's come out of nowhere. I thought I had an idea of all the players in the draw I need to keep an eye on, but then what I saw more and more players like you would come through, and what was the hierarchy that I thought in my head where I sat changed probably around 15, 16, and that was a challenge. And so that's where I probably lost my enjoyment just for a little while of tennis because I just was trying to figure that stuff out and how to deal with losing, really, and probably how to deal with not growing. I sort of wasn't the biggest kid and sort of had a bit of a real late growth spurt well after high school, really, for me. So so yeah, they were my challenges. But I mean, we could talk all day about some of the things that we've come across in junior tennis. But ultimately, it was a very positive experience. But I think, yeah, for me, it was just my identity because I was good from a young age. I didn't really think about doing anything else for many, many years because I just happened to be really good at tennis. That was sort of and everyone would make a big deal of you around that, around school or tournaments, and you sort of every kid in the draw, you beat them before you jump on the court. I remember that so much. Just I reckon 50% of the matches I would beat them in the head before I even hit a ball, and so I enjoyed that. I loved it, but it yeah, as I said, as it got to the pointy end of high school when decisions need to be made, that's probably where I struggled a little bit with what do I want to do with my tennis. So yeah, I mean, everyone probably knows listening to this that through studying Play USA, I went to college and I'm sit here today so passionate about the pathway. But I fought it and fought it and fought it. It wasn't really the done thing back then. If you still want to be a professional, there was quite a lot of coaches down here in Australia talking me out of it, and so I never really quite embraced college initially when I went with 100% focus. So I always had that nagging, I guess, feeling or worry that I'm wasting time. So I felt time pressure was a huge one for me. I don't know if you guys felt that. I just remember, I wrote it in my book. I don't know if you guys remember reading this bit, but there was a meeting that took part where sort of some juniors were hauled into a room and they showed us videos of Crickstein, Agassi, Sampras, all these gun Americans killing it, and they were young.
Oh yeah.
And it's just the encouragement there to maybe just leave school at year 10, which is not an option in my family at the time. I probably wished it was. Wasn't a big fan of school, but yeah, that was a really big moment when I look back. And that moment only actually came up through writing. I actually even forgot about it. It wasn't, but when I think about it, that moment where they sort of said, "Look, you've got to make it in this sort of time frame, otherwise you're wasting your time and money." Gosh, that changed everything for me, and my enjoyment in tennis probably just dwindled a bit after that. So I thought, gee, I've got to get in the gym, I've got to get bigger, I've got to grow, I've got to develop a weapon, I've got to make it by the time I'm 19, 20, otherwise this has all been a waste. So that was a big thing for me that I grappled with for years, even when I was in college. But I don't know, did you guys experience something similar to that, or feel pressure in that regard, in terms of a timeline?
Yeah, I think I'll jump in there, mate. It is because, I mean, you get to that point where you transition out, and again, unlike you guys, I didn't go to college. Obviously, one of my regrets. You talk about the encouragement. It was the same thing. I had a lot of people start calling me up after that little bit of sort of international success. I remember Coach Fish from Harvard calling me up and telling me about their number one recruit, some guy called James Blake that I'd never heard of. Remember, usually that's sort of it's a bit of a laugh from most people when they sort of hear the fact that I turned that down, because the opportunities that you can sort of see, it's obviously, we know the options that you get there and how good it can be for kids' development. But having gone pro straight away, it really is, because straight away the first thing is cost. Like, obviously you've got to figure out how you're going to afford to pay the hotel, how you can afford to pay the flight, how you can afford to really get through. And again, time just keeps ticking away. And one of the big pressures there again, for me, going out there is a lot of your mates sort of transitioning in their lives too. They start going through uni, they start getting jobs, obviously they start having families, and as you sort of progress, there is that sort of nagging doubt. And I remember having some pretty tough conversations with my parents, because obviously I think it's probably easier when I played, having the system of satellites where you had hospitality, and if you're still in the doubles draw, you got a little bit of per diem to pay your way through tournaments, so you could still have enough sort of support to pay yourself. But just having one of those really tough chats with my dad, and he's like, "Well, what are you doing, mate?" And you're talking about all those areas, because you start looking at the idea of, well, what do I need to develop? I need to get stronger, I need to get fitter, I need to get faster. This process that we're talking about, reality there is it takes time. It takes so much. And again, I probably had a little bit of natural ability, which got me to a certain point, but there's also the years that I missed out on from that earlier age that probably, Batesy, that we're talking about, that you got, is you can see it's you got to pay the price at some point. and that pressure that's there, it can really weigh on you and make you think. I mean, I can't count the amount of times that I thought I was going to quit and want to hang them up. Tough losses in the middle of nowhere. It's funny. I'm not sure if I'm jumping off track here, but Rossi, I remember some good ones with some good mates of yours from Queensland, in Toby Mitchell and Grant Silcock.
Yeah,
some of the boys. Yeah, we had some good battles in the Ukraine. I mean, playing week to week, played the guys 3 out of the 4 finals in a circuit. Obviously, to see who won the circuit with another one of the Aussie boys. But yeah, it really does provide some of those sort of soul-searching moments. And I know you, again, talking about your book there, Batesy, it was one of the things in Game Changer I absolutely loved. I know when I finally got it, literally couldn't put it down, read it front to back in one sitting. And it's there's so much good stuff in there, but that was one of the elements that really did resonate, is because it's you can get swept up in the vortex of the journey, and you don't really know where it's going to take you. And but I know all the experiences that you had. I'm pretty glad that I did, because I've come out on the other side, obviously being equipped to handle a lot of things that life could throw at you.
Yeah, it's a good point, mate. I think just touching on that, like, because you're right on the subject matter that I want to chat to you boys about, because this term called making it, I struggled with it, right? And I think making it, to me, just the way it was presented to me and talked about with the coaches that always said it's like there's only one good outcome in as a tennis player, and that's being a pro. And there's nothing else to gain from playing tennis. Like, that's how I heard it. Obviously, that wasn't the explicit message, but how I heard it was, you've got to make it, otherwise you've wasted all your talent, or you're not getting anything out of tennis unless you make it. So that's how I heard it. And so when you sort of getting into 17, 18, 19, you've also got this message saying, look, you run out of time. Honestly, it was just such a tough thing for me to get my head around, like, in that time pressure. I mean, there's nothing more stressful, I reckon. Like, it's just, being able to perform under pressure, under a time prescription. Like, to me, that was a big thing for me. I don't know, but yeah, this making it term, I never really grasped it. So, like, to listen to you, like, all 3 of us are pretty similar in the sense that, we didn't become household names, in Australian tennis necessarily, but we've all got a lot out of the sport. So that the term making it can be really, it really was defining for me, and it probably shouldn't have been. But have you got any take on that from Dr. Ross up here?
yeah. I think it's easy to look back now, isn't it? Maybe at the time as a junior, and when families are in the competitive landscape and listening, getting advice from coaches and so forth, it's probably easy to look back now and say, you know what, all these things we experienced, some good, some bad, some challenging, a lot of fun, all this big mixed bag, was just all incredibly important, valuable experiences. And I think, we've talked about some of the benefits, and most of all, as we've mentioned a few times, for me, is this just a sense of resilience, right? That you develop in a sport like tennis, in whatever path you take. It just develops such resilience. I've worked in different sports, and for me, just the requirements of tennis as a sport and the challenges that you face, and the idea of being on the court on your own and having to figure stuff out and face challenges and getting exposed, there's no hiding. It's just such playing the sport and competing and trying to do your best is just, it's an incredibly valuable experience just on its own. So yeah, that sense of the benefits you gain and the joys that the sport bring, there's obviously much more than just making it. And I think my second point on it would be what's really important for families to understand is that most families, or a lot of families and parents, think the idea of making it, so to speak. So let's when I think of making it, when I was growing up, was top 100, like become a top 100 ATP player.
That was the number.
Yeah. So and there's a real confusion or a misunderstanding around the idea, if you make the top 100, if you're on that pro tour, you're going to be happy like that. And having got to a certain level where I had some exposure to that level, hung out with a lot of players who did that. But one particular memory I have, which I use a lot when I'm talking to families on this idea, is when I was in college. Actually, I went to Pepperdine and in California, and over one of the summers, at that time there's a WTA event at Huntington Beach in Los Angeles, and our coach Peter Smith, who you mentioned, I'm not quite sure how, organised for a couple of us to be hitting partners, and I became Martina Hingis's hitting partner for a couple of weeks. And she was number one in the world at the time, and going from college, I was like this is going to be unbelievable. Like, how good is this going to be? Go hang out. How good must her life be? This is going to be the best. And literally within like 2 days, I reckon, I was just sitting there on the court going, well, like, this doesn't really seem much fun. Like, this doesn't seem much enjoyment. And what really hit me at that point was I genuinely believed that, look, she was number one in the world. I was a college kid, zero money, done nothing. Like, I was happier than her. I can guarantee that, right? And just from that experience, it became really, really quickly. I recognised that the challenges she had, and that was something that I could have never wrapped my head around, the idea that you could be number one in the world and unhappy or not enjoying that experience. It was just it's something that's just stuck with me forever. And that's a really important thing for families to understand who are in this idea of making it on the pro tour and whatnot. Your kids it will only be enjoyable and valuable if they develop the skills along the way that support an enjoyable perspective of that experience. So I think that's a really important one to recognize when we're considering this idea.
It's awesome, mate. Really appreciate you talking about that, because that's I didn't realize that. With Martina Hingis, my favorite all-time female player. And you've worked with my favorite male player, Bourgeois. Anyway, that's good, Rossi. That's awesome.
But I haven't talked much about this with Luke, but I suspect traveling with Federer, it would have been different, right? Like, he seems from the outside looking like he has found that balance of really enjoying his life along the way while being for so long and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, the two things there, it's talking about making it, probably backtracking a little bit. You mentioned that top 100 number. For everyone, it was like I viewed 260 in the world, so I was number 7 in Australia as a pro. I had that same concept of I underachieved. And now with the coaching experience that you have, you're actually recognised at the wins. I mean, beating a guy like Andy Murray or David Ferrer or the Bryan brothers, having those wins along the way, you can celebrate it in a different way. But yeah, it's a really interesting comment, because the second thing there is, interestingly enough, I was Jennifer Capriati's hitting partner.
Okay.
And literally the exact same recognition here in Sydney. I'm here in the office at Sydney International. We're gearing up for the ATP Cup, so all the courts are being resurfaced, or build-ups happening. So we're out here, and I had the exact same thing. I actually invited her out. I said, hey, let's go down to Bondi. And she's like, do you think I can go to Bondi Beach? And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And she's like, I have to ask Dad. He was this girl in the mid-20s that had to ask her dad permission to go to the beach. And of course, what did Dad say? No. And I just saw that same thing, and you could see the idea of the skills. And obviously there's been some complications in her life along the way, but in comparison, in contrast to Roger, you're 100% right. There is the way, the amount of life and fun that he has in every circumstance. I mean, again, stories that cling to mind was we're getting ready for the US Open. I think it was 2006, and playing Cincinnati. Cincinnati out there, it's not the most fun place to play an event. I remember, like, what are we going to do here? And Roger's like, I got an idea. So we jump in the car, drive to a strip mall in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, where are we going? He's like, not going to tell you, just keep coming with me. He took me for my first pedicure and manicure. There was nothing to do. And it was like the craziest thing. And I was like, don't think I've ever actually told anyone. I was like, you swear you can't tell any of the boys, you can't tell any of the boys that I'm in here with this. But it's just, no matter where you were or no matter what it was, you'd always find something fun, something, and again, just to be able to go in and see it. And that's the personality that he is. And again, I know his mum obviously speaks at length about the way she actually tried to raise him, some of the things that she did even as a youngster, trying to get him to be independent, even as a young 12-year-old in Basel, to get on his push bike and drive through traffic and get across to tennis and do that himself. You can see how such an important part in the bearing on how we perceive things and what you can make of it, because again, Roger is a great example there of no matter where he is, he's always going to be having fun, always having a good time and getting the most out of it.
That's pretty cool, mate. And I think one of the much as those are all good points, I think what the listeners will probably really want to know is you mentioned that that was your first pedicure. Does that suggest that you've had more?
My first and only, mate.
Okay, good. Okay, I'll clarify that one, mate.
Cheers, bud.
Guys, I might just moving on to the college stuff. I know we've heard why you went to college, Rossi, which was, in your mind you thought you needed more time and you weren't yet good enough and needed that exposure. And we know why you didn't go, Luke. And if I was in your position, I dare say I definitely would have done the same and not gone. And obviously the reason I went, probably talked about that a little bit as well. And it's obviously, we touch on that a lot in the book. The book's obviously not about college. It's actually what I got out of college, but it's actually this journey that we've just been talking about and how it led to college and what college then did for me. But if we talk college for a bit, I think the big is it, obviously in what you do in Voyager you've got a very big college focus. It's not the only pathway, but it's a great pathway, and I think it's gaining more traction, every day here in Australia as more and more kids going. And I think we'll touch on why I think that is later. But I think just with college, in terms of that transition from junior tennis into this massive team environment, that was the biggest thing for me. And I think that's so beneficial. And we just talked about enjoyment. When I meet with so many families, and I would almost say 100% of time, mums and dads will say, "Oh, John, Luke, they'll always play better in a team environment. They're much more comfortable playing doubles." And that's normal. I think that means people just like to be in that environment. And you get some people obviously that love being in their own skin and their own space, and but generally speaking, people want to share this journey with others. So I think that's, for me, the biggest thing that jumped out straight away with college for me was, this is a place where I can lose and not be stuck on a back court, and the only one who really cares about that loss or win is me and mum and dad. No one else cares because they want to beat you. Whereas in America, I can have some devastating losses here. I'm going to jump on the team bus and we're going to whack our arms around each other and we'll sing a team song and we'll listen to some dodgy country music and have a nice dinner. Did you find that too, Rossi? Is that something you expected when you went to college, or is that just
well, I guess, yeah, you didn't, because we didn't do that much team stuff growing up. It's not something that I would have expected, I don't think, but absolutely, that was the same experience for me. Like, I loved playing for the team, and it was both motivating, so your passion and the drive to do well for me, like, just went through the roof. But as you say, when you had the losses, you could still have the enjoyment of your teammates and hanging out together and consoling each other, I guess, and so forth. So I think that absolutely was a massive part of enjoying the college journey. And I guess thinking back now, I think just the level of care you have for what you're doing is higher for me, like, than when I eventually went out and played doubles on the tour and so forth. Like just how much I wanted to win and how much I really struggled with the losing and so forth was just so high in college tennis that it's definitely, for me, it was just the highlight of my tennis playing life for sure. Some of the big matches in front of really passionate crowds and so forth was, their memories that I'm very, very glad I've got, and they're very vivid, to this day.
Yeah, that's good. Good point. Because I think at the end of the day, no one knows when a career is going to end for anyone. Doesn't matter how good they are too. And I think that's something that was a big selling point to me for going to college was come and have an amazing experience if nothing else, right?
Yeah.
And what will happen with your tennis will happen, and those types of memories, that's probably why I started writing the book, was actually just to share those memories so that my little fella can read it and his kids maybe one day if they're interested in reading about their old granddad. But um, I just that's why I started writing it. But in writing it, it also brought up all these challenges that we've just been chatting about. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, I think a lot of people mistakenly think this is a book about trying to encourage people to go to college. I mean, I think it worked for me, and it works for a lot of kids and a lot of people. Rossi, you've had a successful outcome out of it as well. But I think it's not to say that this is a blue sky, everything's perfect pathway either. You're still dealing with difficult scenarios. You're away from home, and obviously the homesickness. For me, I had a few heart issues, literally. Had to have an operation here and there, and injuries and all sorts of things. But I think that's why you go to college, to sort of embrace it. And so, yeah, I think that's probably the main takeaways from college. But Luke? I know you didn't go, mate, to college, and you always say it's one of your big regrets. But through, I guess, your mates who've gone, and I guess the players that you've coached, right? Is there anything else we've missed there that you've noticed that seem to be the good outcomes from that pathway?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned there, it definitely is one of the few regrets. I feel like, I mean, it would have created more opportunities. I would have been even a better athlete with that 4 years of grounding. But just again, talking about it now and again, reading your book, which I recommend for everyone. It is such a great read just from a storytelling perspective. But it's probably what resonates for me is even having the experience of not and the tough times too, especially when you're trying to establish yourself on the tour. We know how tough it is. I mean, remember the first match I played against was a 27-year-old who, again, got the better of me, and I didn't even know what to do. I mean, the next week you'd have another match for a week or so, and you're trying to figure out what's going on. And again, those experiences, I probably think back to one of our young students, a guy called Alex Ferkich, who was a young player, coached him for, I'm trying to think, best part of 3 or 4 years in our programs, and spent a lot of time with Vuk. And he was adamant that he wanted to play pro. And I know how important it is that where you surround yourself with. So literally said, hey, mate, the best thing you can do is get over to Spain. Go to Spain for 3 months. Go and actually get a taste to see what it's really like. And again, living out of a suitcase as a sort of a 17, 18-year-old trying to find your way, competing on the international tour in a really cutthroat industry too. And especially for us Aussies, where you go there, you're doing it on a shoestring, generally by yourself. Came back, obviously got a few ATP points and different things. He was happy, but he just realized, hey, look, I'm so far off the mark. I think he's a good example too, because he was a good player. He obviously got into a great program there in Illinois, but had 4 years in that environment that you're talking about. I mean, the team idea of how much. So, I mean, you're sort of talking about the idea of winning and losing as a team, but just having that support to be there to push each other. Because for us here at the academy, we had a day on Monday and Tuesday where we had all our team, as well as an orientation day for our incoming students, and just that whole element of team and seeing how you interact and how you can push each other and drive each other. It's just it's massive. It's massive, and Luke's a good example there of where he's been able to go on. I'm not 100% sure where his ranking is. He's down 140, 150, but obviously doing it tough through the COVID times. But you can see how it just makes you a better version of yourself, having that team that you're constantly sparring against, as well as driving to drive each other to new heights, but as well as to sort of galvanize and come together to try to beat other teams. It really is such a great opportunity. Again, my family's done it, my 2 nephews, my niece, and again, the experiences. I mean, probably the last thing I'd say, I've never, ever heard someone say they've regretted going. Never heard it. So, but on the other hand, I've heard a ton of people like me that have said the opposite. That it's
Yeah, that's a pretty good wrap, isn't it? Yeah, it's one of those things. And on that, mate, that's an interesting one, because for me, looking back, I was unlike you, Rossi, and it sounded like you really wanted to go and you were fully committed to going. I wasn't. I had to be significantly convinced, and so um,
And didn't you leave again? Like you took some time off when
yeah,
you were there?
yeah. It took me 3 attempts at college before I realised why I was there and why I needed to stay. So it's just interesting, isn't it? I was still fighting those. Come back to that meeting that I had with those other juniors about this time crunch, and so, oh gee, how can I commit to 4 years and waste 4 years? That was my mindset, and so I need to get out there, and I've got to play, and I've got to go and make it now. So it was an interesting one, but
What was it that you eventually on that third go that you realised? Or
look, I think I was. I got a bit of a scare, I suppose, that college was going to be taken away from me because I mucked around in my second attempt and with my studies because I thought I was never coming back. I was definitive. I'm going out there on the tour. My name's going to be up in lights, and um, just typical 19-year-old thinking probably, but proved to be wrong. And then I go, gee, where do I go now with my tennis? Well, I want to go back to where I love it. I loved my time in college. I want to go back. Hey, coach, will you have me back? And coach goes, yes, Chris, heard this all before, mate. But yes, we'll take you. But this time you've got to come and you got to sort this out and you got to stay. You got to give me a commitment. You're going to give it a go. So what happened was I got back and I just saw tennis in a different light. I sort of relaxed a little bit and realised that I needed time as much as I was fighting time. I needed it, and so I need to lose more and I need to win more to learn. And I just started doing well academically. That was probably the other thing. I found what I was really interested in studying, which was consumer behaviour, marketing, advertising, business. I just found that really interesting and had some unbelievably good professors that were sort of mentoring me through that path. And so all of a sudden my mind's opened up to something other than tennis for the first time ever in terms of a possible career. And then also I guess I had a heart problem too, Rossi, which you'd know about, and that changes things too, because gee, what if I actually can't play tennis? What if something else happens where I have to keep forfeiting matches because of this heart complaint? So I was forced to just think differently and think outside that box. So, and the scary thing is, or really crazy thing for me, is that the minute I did that, the minute I sort of started focusing on study and focusing on something other than tennis as a career, my tennis went like that. So, and then you go, but even then, I still knew that I still wasn't quite good enough. So I was just in a better place, a bit more open. I'm probably just another year or so older as well, so a bit of maturity. And I was losing enough just to make me realise that, gee, maybe I'm not quite ready to be a pro, and maybe I don't want to be, So, and maybe it's okay if I'm not. Maybe I'm not a failure if I don't make it in that sense. So that was the realisation. I think I wrote about 4 chapters on that concept.
yeah,
So yeah, that was a really interesting period of life. But yeah, it's I think it's why I'm so passionate about the pathway now, and is because that nearly didn't happen. I'm just so thankful I had all that experience and that those challenges, because thank God I went back to college that third time and just had the most ridiculously good 2.5 years to finish off, and both as a tennis player, as a person, as a traveller through America, and as a student. So yeah, completely a game changer, really. That's sort of changed everything. So anyway, that's a blatant plug, wasn't it, for the book?
Yeah, I like that one.
Did you see what I did there?
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And just I'm just going to make a point too. Something you just said, Beatty, was the idea of like having this more balanced perspective and having college as an option. And for those families, for me, that are only interested in the making it bit, the eventual outcome of the child, or kids, right? Kids who just say, I just want to become the best player I can be. And for me, that's on the professional circuit. It's very, very possible that taking the college pathway is the best option from the point of getting a more balanced perspective and feeling less pressure, because ultimately in my work, a lot of what I do is working with tennis players who over time develop habits that are basically unhelpful in responding to the natural pressures that are very high, right? Stresses and the anxiety and the what's riding on outcomes and so forth. And it's very common that players develop habits when the pressure is so high that making it and the outcome and the results is everything. And that's very much part of the pro tour. That they develop habits which are hard to change, essentially, and maybe with less pressure and a different perspective, players that didn't make it would have made it if they had gone to college. So I think that's a really important one to reflect on, particularly for players who are struggling with the pressures and stresses that come with trying to be a professional tennis player.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think statistically too, right, to back that point up, I think the average age now in that top 100, if we call that the making it zone, right, where people are making a bit of money, sustaining their livelihood, I think, statistically it's an older generation now. There's some young guns, always will be, but you still got time. I think it's 10 years from when you finish high school on average. Age of 27 is how long statistically they say you've got to make it. So that's 10 years. Why not spend 4 of those in college saving money and learning? We're not in a rush, okay? I think that's the big thing. We were back when we were all juniors. That was the mentality. I still think some people are stuck in that rush. There's no doubt about that. I think we haven't really recovered fully from that era. Like, that's 30 years ago. But I think people have got time. Just, and the thing is, there's no contract in college. There's the expectation that you see out your first semester at the very least. And that was a massive selling point to me. You don't need to commit to 4 years. Come and try it. See if you're good enough. If you're beating everyone, off you go. If you're not, maybe you just need to hang around for a bit. So I think that's all good points there.
There's plenty of fantastic examples, though, of guys who were doing incredible things in college. Your Isners, and most recently Norrie. I think of Norrie. I worked with TCU when he first came, freshman and sophomore, and ultimately he was dominating college tennis by his third year, but he stayed 4 years, and it hasn't hurt him, just winning his first Masters series a couple of months ago.
Yeah,
and he's a fantastic example of when you get into a program that's right for you and you get really good support around you, and like Luke said about Ferkich, it's a fantastic way to maximize your chances to eventually become successful on the pro tour, for sure, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, that's right. I think
sorry, Chris. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was just saying, I think it's a stretch for any of us to say, college is the best pathway to pro. I think you could argue for it, you could argue against it, but I think you could argue any pathway. I think there isn't one. I think you mentioned it before, Luke, that there's no real secret recipe, right? It's just working hard, and you need luck. There's no doubt about it. You need some luck with injury. You need luck with just timing. Ideally a bit of financial backing, and all those types of things can help. But yeah, why not go somewhere? This is my mentality. Why not go somewhere where you're going to find all those things out, before you get on the tour? You're going to physically develop emotionally. You're going to have something else to fall back on that you're working towards that makes you feel good about yourself. Okay, and then you're in a great situation, age 21, with the world at your feet, with the degree behind you. Gee, am I good enough, or do I want to be a pro? Okay, yes, awesome. If not, okay, go forth and get a real job, cut your hair off like I did, and hopefully it grows back, and off you go. Yeah. So anyway, I think you were going to add something, Luke. I cut you off.
No, it is. I mean, we're talking about again, different journeys that we've taken, and all. I would say ended up in relatively similar sort of positions. But it's what I've seen as well is the idea of kids that, again, even the journey I took, people that did go to college, you find that they can battle away on tour for the first 3 or 4, 5, 6 years. What I saw is the kids that went to college, they actually just got through that really hard yards much faster because, again, they're in an environment being part of that team where they're, again, you're going as a freshman, you're generally competing against other freshmen. You can see you're doing the strength work. You actually had that 3 or 4 years of development being in that nurturing environment. I mean, I saw a lot of guys, and one of my contemporaries, a guy called Pete Luchak, and to see what Luch did through college and how quickly he then transitioned into having a really successful career on tour. I mean, I'd almost argue that if he didn't go to college, I think it would have been very, very difficult for him to actually get the grounding what he needed to get at college at Fresno State there to end up being a top 100 player for an extended period of time, because you just see how quickly they can transition from college. And again, the timeline, as you've mentioned there, is if you're good enough, early enough, you might only stay 2, 3 years, whatever it may be, and then transfer. And I know some of the guys that did play on tour have then turned and gone back to college after they've finished playing on tour. So there are those opportunities to take that different pathway. And again, the more I talk about it, the more I'm kicking myself that I didn't have people like us that were sending me down the right path.
Yeah,
because it's a lot of fun. And that's the key thing, I think, also too. It's just, again, the stories that you hear, and for me, so often, my nephew who's graduated from college, I mean, you hear the stories of people flying back to their mates' weddings and all the different things all around the world. And it's just, yeah, you can see it's literally, as you said, the time of their lives.
yeah, no, really good, and probably not a bad one to finish off on, guys. Mindful of your time, you're both busy men. Might just finish on one just quick thing, guys. Maybe just one last piece of advice for juniors and parents who are out there now, navigating this pathway as a junior tennis player or parent. Just to finish off, I'll leave you two with the final word.
Rossi, you go.
Okay.
Rossi, you can start.
I would say I just reinforce, I think, what I said earlier, and that is when you're viewing tennis, I would say view it as the opportunity of a lifetime to have a lot of fun, develop great skills, and ultimately use it as a venue for learning skills, creating great memories, relationships that can help you enjoy and make the most of your life, whichever path you go on. And seeing it through that perspective from a family point of view, in my experience, is the best way to set kids up to have that experience and maximize their chance to become as good as they can.
It's a good little pot of gold there, Anthony. That's going to be hard one to follow, Luke.
But he's gotten into my head, because, I mean, for me, I took that tennis being the vehicle that just opens the world to you. And that's really what I see is again, it's a really similar sort of line of thought there, where it's being able to enjoy the journey. Too often we get so caught up in the outcomes and thinking about the destination. I know it is cliche in that sense, but it literally is that exact same concept, where if you can really enjoy the ride and enjoy the process and enjoy the experience, the friendships, the journeys. I mean, look at for us, I mean, the tennis world, it can take you all over the place, and you can experience so many great things and meet so many cool people that will shape you for all. So, yeah, I mean, Rossi, I can't top that, so I'm just going to jump on the bandwagon there and literally say the exact same thing, because it is so true. I couldn't, and again, I know you're probably not going to do it. I'd sort of recommend, we are getting close to Christmas, guys. Game Changer, as I said, it is the last book I've read, and I literally could not put it down.
Is that one, Luke?
Yeah, and it's still sitting by my bed, mate. It's still right there. I see it every day. But it really is for all parents that are, I mean, again, not just interested in the pathway. I mean, to me, interested in sport, in tennis. It just shows you how much sport can shape you and the environment. And that's where I think your journey, Chris, was, again, for me, it was so cool to see you and know you from a 12-year-old all the way through to now, and the journey that you can take. I mean, I think it was such a fantastic read that I just highly recommend it to everyone, and make great Christmas gifts.
Oh, mate. Oh, the check's in the mail. That was well said. I appreciate it, fellas, and appreciate you joining me today and having a bit of a reminisce. And, great to catch up anyway, but hopefully we've been able to impart a little bit of our advice that we've learnt along our own journeys, but through those of the kids that we work with and families. So really appreciate your time guys, and I'll hopefully catch up with you both before Christmas. We might do this again, and we'll do volume 2. We can tell some more stories and get into more juicy details maybe. Yeah. All right.
That sounds like fun.
The next trip that Federer took Luke on after the pedicure.
Right. Yeah.
Volume 2, the teaser.
Volume 2. There we go. Probably be in Dubai.
You have to tune in to find out what it was.
Yeah, that's right. The teaser. I like it.